And we're back.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the only podcast that you'll find on YouTube, but soon other places as well, that involves doctors who are
Not doctors.
Indeed. So once again, we can diagnose problems with society, but we cannot diagnose your psoriasis.
Well, not legally.
No.
And not competently.
No, if you want us to do it illegally, you can meet us around the back of the Tesco between 2 and 3 a.m.
And Tesco is a grocery store in the UK for those of us who don't live there.
It's good to know these things.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And we provide cultural education, Chris. I think you'll find.
Yeah. No, we definitely keep the people informed and happy.
Exactly.
In everything that we do as we sit on our golden thrones here in liberal England.
It is amazing to live in what I would call a free country, Chris. It's quite nice.
I don't know. I mean, I was told it's a socialist paradise and that, the Browns are running through the streets and they've infiltrated everything, but that's just what Captain Vance had said to me.
See, now there's your problem, Chris.
What's that?
Well, it turns out that that Captain Vance is not known for telling what we in the business like to call true things.
The truth.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's an actual captain. I'm just calling Captain Vance because I don't like...
I mean,
first off, thank you for your service, JD Vance.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you for your
yes.
service.
The Marines absolutely needed you to be safe in an office writing press releases. It absolutely just, it let us win the war on terror.
That particular war, yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway, so we are definitely talking about things that have happened this week and since we were last on our little podcast here. Yeah. So thank you for tuning in. If you are tuning in, if this is your first time,
then welcome. It's good to have you. Good to see you. Say hello in the comments. Do lots of things in the comments. Type random comments because after all, everyone knows that the algorithm is how we live and die. So
for now, we definitely need the algorithm to keep us, in check as we try to survive one day to the next, which is becoming ever more complicated. In the Western world.
It is. In fact, it's interesting that you talk about the Western world, Chris, because I think that's an excellent place to start. Is there a Western world at this point? And if so, who's in it?
Yeah, no, there's a Western world, but it's obviously at being stretched to its very limits, because I think that if you get to the midterms and the Republicans are able to maintain their control of the Congress, then Western world becomes a lot more complicated. At which point, America wouldn't be part of it.
Well, that's the scary thing, isn't it? And I think there's a lot of discussion at the EU level, as well as I think in Britain, about exactly what Britain's place is in this new situation that we find ourselves in. Is Britain going to be able to maintain its special relationship with the United States? Is it going to be able to maintain itself as a bridge between the EU and the US? Will Georgia Meloni be that new bridge?
Why is everybody the new bridge, by the way?
Everybody
who goes into the White House is supposed to be the new European bridge. It was Macron, then it was Starmer, now it's Meloni. Yeah. I mean, I forget the name of the German chancellor right now, but it's
Merz.
Oh, Merz, yeah. So, I mean, if he walks into is he supposed to be the new guy?
I mean, he seems a bit stiff to me, so I feel like a proper bridge should be a bit flexible. Not too flexible, because then you get the problem with the Millennium Bridge, which famously, after it was installed, started wobbling a bit much.
What was it called? The topsy-turvy? The
wibbly wobbly?
The wibbly wobbly. Yeah, that's right, because you can't have any normal named things here.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, I mean, we've got that giant, business building that is somewhat.
There are so many business buildings.
It's called the Gherkin.
Oh, the Gherkin.
The
Gherkin. Yeah, no, that was one of the first ones. The walkie-talkie, the Gherkin.
Famously melted a Porsche.
Oh, that was cool. Put that in the description. I'm gonna write that down.
Well, you got it. You got it.
No.
This walkie-talkie melts Porsches. That's I want to put that on a sticker, and I want to slap it on the side of the building, and I want to run away before the security tackles me.
Actually,
to the ground.
the walkie-talkie has a really good Sky Garden.
Oh, it does.
That's free. If you just sign up, it's free to sign up, and there's a couple restaurants and a bar or two up there.
Yeah, no, it's really it's proper It's proper posh.
but not as good as the Shard, and it's not as posh as the Shard either. I'm a
Probably
Shard
not.
man myself.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I don't know. The Shard, it's just very tall, it's very jagged. And I saw that episode of Doctor Who
Oh,
where it's also the headquarters of an alien invasion. And I just can't look at the Shard the same way now.
they did the same
You
thing
know?
with Canada Tower, and
Well,
when Canada Wharf
well,
was
you
like
want
the
to.
thing.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah.
like, what's the newest, biggest, most futuristic building in London? Ooh, let's turn
Gotta
it
be
into
aliens.
the gateway of like all the Daleks and
Well, yeah. Well, it's the great thing about doing Doctor Who in this country is that all you have to do is point the camera at some buildings in London and make up a story, and it's gonna work.
oh well, yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of like the low budget aspect of it, even though it's not that low budget anymore.
I prefer to think of it as like found art.
Found, found, yeah, that we can all see. Everybody knows what it is.
Yep.
Anyway, we've been rambling on for a while here. So we have a couple things we're going to talk about today. The shooting at Florida State.
Yep. The status of due process in the United States.
Yeah, bonds and tariffs and the markets that are happening. The things that
Bonds
have
and
happening.
tariffs and markets. Oh my.
Oh my, yeah, the things that have been going on since we last were on the digital airwaves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then of course there's a big ruling here in the UK.
Oh yes. The Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, not the Supreme Court of the United States. Very different Supreme Court.
Very different kind of thing. Yeah.
Has issued a ruling that is going to just take up everybody's headspace for like the next 3 weeks. I think this is probably going to be just as people sort of think about what the ruling means, what the implications of it are going to be, and as various political actors see how they can make it work for them.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's going to be fascinating to watch. And
Yeah.
we, of course, are going to discuss it calmly, collectively, reasonably.
Yeah, we're gonna. It's
And
definite eggshells are walking on with
Exactly.
that one.
Not at all like two white, straight, cis men who are just going to, blather on about their opinions.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Given that we are not two white straight cis men,
Yeah, exactly. We collectively are not two white, straight, cis
collectively
men.
we are not
And
two.
I am going to stand on that statement. So
Yes,
there you
yeah.
go. Yeah.
So why don't we get started with the sad shooting at our alma mater?
I suppose we should do, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I mean, so yesterday, so we're recording this on the 18th of April, and yesterday, on the 17th of April, I got a message from a friend of mine who also went to Florida State who said, have you heard about the shooting? Now, in 2014, there was a shooting just outside the library. I don't know if you'll remember
That's
that.
right. I do remember that now that you
Yeah.
bring it up. Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's been another one now that was there's a person who basically walked outside of the student union and just started shooting his weapon around. Now, apparently he was almost immediately taken down, shot, but not killed. He did manage to kill 2 people and injure
Right.
6 others who I believe are going to be okay, or they will recover
Yeah.
from the attack. So it's an incredibly sad time for Florida State, which if you've never been on the campus, and most of you wouldn't have been on the campus, it's for me a very beautiful campus. Has these old Spanish oak trees,
Oh,
which
yeah.
has these the moss that falls.
A lot of Spanish moss.
A lot of Spanish moss.
Yep.
But it's kind of like this oasis within like the urban setting of Tallahassee, which isn't a very big city, so there won't be a person who won't be affected by this.
Yeah, yeah, and it's always it's one of the weird things about sort of growing up American is that you have heard the phrase "Did you hear about the shooting?" and you've heard that phrase way more often than is reasonable, I think, or that is reasonable for any kind of society, basically.
Yeah,
You know.
you definitely like when you say the shooting, and because we've grown up with this. I mean,
Yeah.
In the 90s, it was always on the news confined to gang activity in the inner city, and never really
God.
spread out to the suburbs or wide areas, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of
Columbine.
Columbine. It wasn't the first school shooting. It
No,
was the
it
first.
wasn't.
Not at all.
Like-
Like
Well, the first one happened, I think, in like 1980. That was the Boomtown Rats even wrote a song about it. Weirdly enough.
I heard there was one even earlier in the 70s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
I don't remember. It's a thing that I saw many years ago when debating somebody about school shootings and how it doesn't matter because he's a MAGA folk.
Oh, okay. So yeah, right. Well, the only thing that could stop a bad guy with a gun is a 12-year-old with a gun. So
Yeah.
that's why we need to arm elementary school students.
Yeah, I mean, the problem here is that this person was the son of a Leon County sheriff deputy. So
Yeah,
that's the weird part here, because like even if there had been super strict gun laws, the person's still a deputy. They would have had access to a weapon.
Well, okay. Now you say that, but I think you'll find that in some countries there are rules regarding not only who can possess weapons, but how they're allowed to sort of keep them stored and safe, right?
Yeah.
There are laws that say if you own a weapon, it is absolutely your legal responsibility to make sure that that weapon is not taken by somebody else. You have to take reasonable steps to secure it, so that others don't take it and then commit crimes with them. Um, and I think that's one of the reasons why, for example, a few years back there was that case where two parents were actually prosecuted for the school shooting that their son committed.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Because they had given him a gun for his birthday after having been told, oh, and also he keeps talking about shooting up the school, and he seems, not really doing very well, and also he keeps having cries for help, and they had a whole meeting with the parents, and the parents are like, yeah, we don't care. Also, we're giving him a gun. So
yeah,
so
yeah, obviously in that case the parents are obviously responsible. In this case, this is probably a case where a kid stole the gun, and decided to head out there and start, for whatever reasons. We won't know until the case.
That is true.
If this person even decides to give us a reason, depending on how they plea. But thankfully the kid's alive, so that this doesn't just be a mystery for the two families that have lost their loved ones.
I mean, that's true, and I do want to unpack that a little bit, what you just said, because it is a good thing that he is alive, because that means that he can stand trial, and that means that the community, I think, has a greater chance of being able to heal, because if you're right, if it had been a situation where he was shot and he was dead and that was it, then there would be a gaping mystery at the heart of it, which I would think would make it harder for people to sort of process this and move on. But man, it is really hard to talk about a shooting in that way, isn't it?
Yeah, it is like, and we are, of course, we live in a country where you can get a gun and a shotgun or a rifle in
That's
the United
true.
Kingdom. It's not like there's no guns here, but it's something.
Farmers' mums.
Yeah, well, there's so many people in America who think that you can't have a gun here, and everybody else is just crazy with their gun laws. Like Switzerland, they're not crazy. The United Kingdom isn't. Well, the United Kingdom is very restrictive.
Yeah.
If I wanted a gun, I'd have to first prove why I needed it.
Yeah.
I'd have to get a permit, and then I'd have to let the police station, my nearest one, know that I've got one, and a bunch of other stuff that need to go along with it.
And you would not be allowed to walk around the streets with it without a very good reason. This is actually an important thing to sort of know if you are going to be in the United Kingdom. Don't walk around with a gun or a knife.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't have a really good reason for doing it, then that is actually breaking the law. That is an offense.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, one of the good reasons you can have, Chris, is if you are wearing a kilt, you are allowed to have
ski and do.
a ski and do. Yeah,
yeah.
The little knife that goes with your kilt outfit.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I think is adorable and also ridiculous. And I'm in favor of that.
And I think that Sikhs might also be able to have the knives.
Oh, absolutely, because that is a religious accoutrement.
Yeah.
And so very reasonable. It's reasonable grounds all around, really.
Yeah. But obviously, hopefully there will be some questions answered. And it's very weird because I during the press conference, I actually know one of the people in the press conference.
Wow.
When I saw him walk in, and I'm like, oh, boom, there he is, and I'm like, it was very real. So hopefully there'll be questions answered, and obviously this is a uniquely American problem that that the right wing have made it impossible to deal with logically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're starting from the standpoint that everyone needs to be able to overthrow the government through violence at any given moment, right? Then it makes it very hard to argue, okay, but like, how often do you need to violently overthrow the government? And also, is that actually a thing we want people to be doing in general? And if so, maybe we should work out the circumstances under which that's acceptable. But so the idea of like, seeing the Second Amendment as basically a right to violently overthrow the state, I think that's. I don't know that that's really legally defensible, but it does seem to be what many people on the right seem to be basing their arguments on.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? And of course, there are also those who argue that no, you need guns to protect yourself against, against crime. And I have, I'm an American. I grew up in South Florida. I grew up in, the kind of situation where you might have theoretically run into crime. I admit I grew up a lot in the suburbs, but there's crime in the suburbs, Chris.
Yes, there is crime in the suburbs.
Yeah. So and
meth. The further north you go.
There's some drugs. I'm not gonna lie to you. There's some drugs in the suburbs. There's some breaking and entering in the suburbs.
Yeah.
Mostly by other people who live in the suburbs.
Definitely.
That's the thing about gated communities. Keeps everyone out, but it also keeps other people in.
Keeps some of them in, yeah.
Yeah. But not once in all my time in Florida, in urban and suburban environments, have I ever been mugged. And I'm not the most physically imposing man. I'm not like someone that, obviously was like, oh, no one's going to mess with Patrick because he's, well, I'm kind of a nebbish. I'm just going to put it out there, right? I can work out as much as I want. I am never going to be someone that, like, makes people go, ooh, as they walk down the street.
Well, keep trying.
Well,
I'm not saying
thanks,
don't.
man.
I'm
Thanks.
just
All
saying,
right, well,
keep trying.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But, it's okay. And the thing is, I feel like if someone was going to mug me, I would see that as being incredible bad luck and not as an indication of, oh, this is always going to happen, and I should have been ready to shoot someone at a moment's notice. Because I feel like if I can go 45 years on this earth without being in that position, but if I had a gun the whole time, I think it's way more likely that something tragic would have happened by accident rather than I would have used it to actually prevent some kind of crime against me, basically.
Yeah, and I find the arguments that, if everybody had a gun, we'd all be safer. Well, that's not true.
Yeah.
Look at driving. And also, we're not all Rambo. We're not all, an action star.
Right?
We're not all trained.
Yeah.
I mean, even with driving, at least you have to be trained. You have to have a license. You need to know what you're doing because you can kill somebody with a car.
Exactly.
So, I mean...
And if you do have a gun and someone gets the drop on you to mug you, they're going to ask for your gun.
Well, it's too late.
Right, well, that's the thing.
By the time
then the mugger's going to get your gun.
Yeah, by the time the crime is happening, it's too late for you to do anything.
Yeah.
You have to be proactive, which means you have to start randomly shooting those who you feel are a threat, which is a thing that happens to black people in Florida.
Gosh, there seems to be quite a few actually very famous cases of literally that happening.
Yeah. We'll probably touch back upon this later, but it's important to note that the person who was a shooter, according to some of his colleagues in school, is a registered Republican and a person who, while he was not at Florida State, was a place called Tallahassee State College, which we would know as
the local community college
TCC,
at the time that I was there.
The Tallahassee Community College, which is now called the Tallahassee State College, was kicked out of a kind of a politics chat group, kind of an in-person discussion group at that.
That's censorship, Chris.
Well,
canceling him from his student politics group. Can you tell me why they did this, Chris?
Oh, because he had massive white supremacist views and he was a fascist.
Oh.
Yeah, so they kicked him out, and they basically said you have to go, and he left. So, and this person went on NBC News and basically said, yeah, this guy is not on the level.
Right.
So, we'll keep an eye on this, and hopefully there might be more information. We'll keep it up. We'll keep the information up, specifically for this reason.
Yeah.
In 4 or 5 days, this story is going to be gone for us.
Yeah.
And obviously it does affect us, just like, when news affects you, you care more.
Yeah.
So, we're going to keep an eye on it.
Well, that's the thing. There's 9 billion people on this planet. Everything's going to matter to someone. And the only thing you can sort of do is, sort of fight your corner. So if that means that we pay more attention to the story than the rest of the media does, that's not entirely surprising. And it's not entirely unfair, I think.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So let's move on. So there has been a couple of movements in the due process thing. Now, every week we talk about due process now because it's important. I actually had a conversation with somebody on the weekend, and this person's American, happened to be in town, and they were basically trying to find ways to justify why Abrego Garcia could have been, deported. And I said, well, there was no proof. Nothing was actually put in front of a judge
Right.
that gave him the reason to go.
No evidence has been provided whatsoever. That's the point of not having due process.
And so this
Right.
person kept on saying, oh, but they might be this, they might be that. And I just stopped her and I said, listen, without due process, you and I are terrorists.
Yeah.
Right? Because the government said so.
Yeah.
Right? So and this person wasn't being malicious. This person wasn't being, a MAGA person. I think this person just, just wanted the normality of saying, well, the government's not going to create a situation where I'm going to be in that much danger.
Oh God. Oh no.
But I mean, that's just normalcy bias.
I know, but like, it still blows my mind that there would be people who, when presented with all the evidence that this is not normal, that we're so far past normality on this. I mean, I get it. I get the fact that you would want that. You would want the idea that, like, well, there has to be an explanation. This can't be what it looks like. And yet, at a certain point, you've got to be able to say, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, and it, gives out Roman salutes like a fascist, then it might be a fascist duck.
It just might be.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is becoming much more obvious now. I think that a lot of Americans, maybe we were immune to this, or first off, because we have advanced degrees in politics.
Well, that's true, actually. And so we have been inoculated against the virus of misinformation. And, well, actually, no.
No, we haven't been inoculated. We're just on that side of the political spectrum, because there are plenty of people with doctorates and advanced degrees on the other side of these arguments. Who are happy to bring about fascism and bring about authoritarianism.
That's true, actually. That's a good point. It's not just the advanced degrees. It's the fact that we're not fascists.
It's the fact that we're not fascists.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it used to be a sign of honor, but apparently, the jury's out on that. But yes, I think a lot of people just want to see, kind of get back to normal. And I think that a lot of people, like, on the upper tiers of American politics and in the judiciary, just didn't think that certain lines would be crossed, even though at every turn
the
Trump,
lines were being crossed.
He actively said, and he wanted to cross lines.
Yeah.
And he did, and he is doing it right now with what you're going to talk about, because obviously the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Because last week we were kind of hard on him.
Oh yeah.
But despite Kavanaugh, though, 9-0 due process exists, and now 9-0.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, sorry. Wait. No. Which case are you talking about? Actually, you're throwing it to me, and I'm afraid I've.
We probably talked about two different cases then.
We might be talking about two. I was going to talk about Wilkinson.
I was talking about. So the Supreme Court said to the Trump administration, "Hang on." All right. Just wanted to let
The police had to, some important business in the area.
Yeah, not in this area.
And I'm not one of those people who says abolish the police, Chris. I just want to make that very clear.
Okay.
But maybe abolish police sirens, or at least find some. There's got to be something else we can do.
It's a hot take. It's a hot take.
It's just all the people with podcasts now. They can have police sirens in the background. This is obviously, it's just going to cause trouble. Yeah.
So, as I was saying, I was talking about the Supreme Court telling the Trump administration that something about Abrego Garcia saying like you have to listen to what the lower courts are saying.
Yes.
So we are talking about the same thing, but you're talking about the furtherance of that.
Yes, that's right, actually, because there's quite a few cases going on at the moment.
Yeah.
Involving not just the Venezuelans who were sent to El Salvador to seek COT under the Alien Enemies Act, but also Abrego Garcia, who was sent and apparently just under no particular law whatsoever, just like no justification for it.
Yeah. Apparently, Pam Bondi, Trump's personal lawyer and also the American Attorney General.
Those are two great things to be at the same time.
Yeah. She apparently put up some files to prove that this guy was a member of MS-13. And apparently at the top of those files it says no criminal convictions.
Yeah, well, because he had no criminal convictions. Like, that's the thing. This isn't like this isn't the kind of thing that can be argued about. This is not the kind of thing about which reasonable people can disagree. This is not Marmite, yay or nay. This is either someone has criminal convictions or they don't.
Yeah.
Right? This is like, either the sun is shining or it is not. And it's really one of those two things. So, it's kind of amazing to me seeing all this talk from the administration basically claiming that, well, we have evidence that he's a gang member. We have evidence he's a terrorist. We have evidence that he's, a baddie. And yet, at no point did they want to bring any of that evidence before a judge, because if they wanted to expel him to El Salvador, Chris,
Yeah.
they could have done that by bringing their evidence before a judge.
Yeah.
And if they could have shown that he was any of the things that they say he is,
Yeah.
even if they could have shown that there was like, I think it would have only been on the standard of more probable than not, the civil standard, they would have been in a position to ask the judge to get rid of his protection against removal to El Salvador. And I think this is a really important thing to mention, by the way.
Yeah.
After he had originally been accused in 2019 of being a member of MS-13 by apparently
Yeah. Yeah.
the world's worst
The worst cop
yeah, just the
in
worst
the
cop.
world.
My God. So after all of that, and the courts had looked at it and said, well, okay, well, that claim is obviously absurd. He has never lived in New York when this confidential informant is claiming he was, a high-up MS-13 member in New York. So, basic facts completely and totally wrong. What the judge did was to say, okay, well, we're giving you protection against removal to El Salvador because you have shown evidence that makes us believe it's more likely than not that if you were to return to El Salvador, that the local gang that you had escaped the country to avoid would take vengeance on you because this group had basically threatened to murder him, to make him a member of the gang, to rape his sister, all of this in order to extort money from his parents, who ran, I believe, a local store in the area. So this is a guy who is, I think it's charitable, it's not even charitable, it's very fair to say, is someone who's basically an enemy of MS-13?
Yeah.
Like, literally the last guy who would voluntarily join this organization. But so he's not protected against, like, removal to not El Salvador. It's specifically El Salvador that he cannot be removed to. That's what the ruling was. That's what the law was.
Yeah.
So it's not just that they expelled him without due process. It's that they expelled him to the one country they were not legally allowed to move him to.
Almost as if it was planned that way, to create this entire firestorm, to create to create this political narrative.
A
that the
perfect
left,
test case, right?
Yeah, because they did everything wrong, and if they get away with it, which they for now haven't gotten away with, because the Supreme Court said the government is in the wrong, and therefore it's up to the lower courts to specify specifically what they need, and that brings you to
well, that's the thing. So the judge who was dealing with the case, by the last name of Shanice, I believe that's the pronunciation. I apologize to Her Honor if I'm getting this wrong. The spelling is Xinis. And so my best guess, without doing proper Googling, like someone who is not a hack and a fraud would. Okay, what's the pronunciation? What do we got there?
I don't know, it's Shanice.
Shanice? All right.
Sorry,
We're going with Shanice.
Let's just call it Shanice for now.
All right. But so the judge has been stripping the bark off of the administration's claims because the administration's claims are absurd. It is absurd to say that you can kidnap a person off of the street, that you can expel them from the country, send them to a torture prison, and then claim that there's just nothing you can do to get that person back, even after you admit that they were removed by accident. And that is what the administration is claiming. So she put forth basically an order saying you need to get him back. Her original order was to facilitate and effectuate his return. And then from that point on to, make sure that he is treated as he would have been under the law if the Trump administration had followed the law in the first place. In other words, not saying he can never be removed, but saying if you're going to do it, you need to go before a judge. You need to provide evidence.
Well, you need to do it right.
Yeah, you got to do it right. You got to follow the law.
You can't just pick somebody up off the street and say, off you go to El Salvador.
Exactly. Now, the Trump administration did appeal this, and it went up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court did something interesting. What they did was they said, all right, you can't actually give that order if you're the judge. There's one word in that order that doesn't work, and that word is effectuate.
Yeah.
Facilitate? Absolutely. Effectuate? Nah. Because the problem is, to effectuate something is to make it happen, right?
Yeah.
And the problem is that Abrego Garcia is currently in El Salvador. To force El Salvador to release him under all circumstances might involve things like declaring war in the worst case, right?
Right, of course.
And a judge really can't order the President of the United States to declare war on someone.
Because the President of the United States cannot declare war
Well, that's true.
unilaterally.
Or
So let's
certainly
be
can't.
clear about that now, because I have a feeling that that's going to become
That's
important later.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. But so, or even to like, order him to, engage in military strikes or do things of that nature. You can't really tell the executive what to do in foreign affairs because there is a separation of powers issue there.
Yeah.
However, facilitate? Yes. So what the Supreme Court said, and this was unanimous, was that the government must facilitate his return, and then they sent it back to Judge Shanice to clarify the order and make sure that it gets done. Basically, the Trump administration's response to this, Chris, has been to say,
yeah, that's an appropriate and an accurate telling of what they thought.
Well, thank you. I've been working on that. Obviously, I'm a real wordsmith.
In fact, didn't they try to flip it and say that the ruling was in their favor?
Stephen Miller did say that the ruling was entirely in their favor because of the whole thing about effectuate, but then he claimed that meant that they didn't have to do anything, and also even if he were returned, they would immediately expel him again in violation of the law. So it's not great. It's not great. It's not a great scenario.
No.
So what do you do if you are a judge and you've given an order and the administration appears to be completely violating that order?
I think there's a better way of going about that. What
Yeah.
happens if a person decides to ignore the orders of the court?
Well, now that's quite a good question, Chris, and I can answer that.
Okay.
What happens is very bad things to that person.
Yeah.
Specifically, that's acting in what is called contempt of court.
Ooh,
and
that's not good.
I know, right? If you've ever seen a legal drama or even a legal comedy, you have almost certainly heard of this idea of contempt.
I will hold you in contempt if you keep on speaking out on this matter.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
how it goes.
Right.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. If you want to learn more about contempt in general, go watch My Cousin Vinny, which is understood by all lawyers worldwide to be the best movie about law in the United States. Just, oh my God, fantastic stuff. But so there's two types of contempt that you can be held in: criminal and civil. Criminal contempt is exactly what it sounds like. It's a crime. If you violate a judge's order in such a way that it is clear that you are doing it deliberately, it's clear that you're doing it, with sort of a malice aforethought, etc., then a judge may hold you in criminal contempt. If that is so, you can be held in prison. And you can be held in prison until you obey the judge's orders, or indeed as punishment for failing to obey the judge's orders. It's quite a serious thing.
Right.
Now you may be asking, well, how does that work? And the way it would work is that the judge would ask the Attorney General to bring a prosecution.
Right.
But let's say the Attorney General doesn't want to do that because the Attorney General is, say, I don't know, hypothetically speaking, a fascist partisan who is unworthy of the label lawyer, much less attorney general.
Allegedly.
In that circumstance, a judge would be able to appoint their own prosecutor.
Yes, the private prosecutor approach. Yes,
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and then if you're found guilty of criminal contempt, you have been found guilty of a crime, and then you can be punished for it. And so I think we want to distinguish the punishment aspect from the compellence aspect, where you're being held until you follow the judge's orders, basically. Now, this is distinct from civil contempt.
Okay.
Civil contempt is where the judge is not saying you've committed a crime, but is saying you have not followed the order. You have failed to do it. There's no question of whether or not you intended to fail to fulfill the order. If you fail to do it, you fail to do it, and you're liable to be held in civil contempt. And that can involve not prosecution, it doesn't involve prison, but it can involve fines.
Ooh.
Oh, and these fines can be considerable. The court has the power to compel obedience to its rulings, because, of course, if it couldn't, it would just be a debating society.
It would just be a talking chamber.
Yeah, it would just be a podcast, Chris.
It would just be a podcast.
Yeah. But so no, they can compel fines and whatnot. They can have all sorts of other rulings as well. If you're a lawyer and you're being held in civil contempt, the judge may very well also report you to your bar counsel, which may decide to do things like, issue sanctions against you up to and potentially even including disbarment.
So what you're saying is that a person who actively acts in contempt of the court
Oh, yes.
could stop being a lawyer because they've committed effectively a crime against the court, and
Absolutely.
they'd have to pay tons and tons of money to the court as a fine for disobedience.
All sorts of things are possible if an individual disobeys the court.
That's an individual.
Yes. What about the Trump administration, you
What
ask?
about let's just not even say the Trump administration, the executive. What if the executive decides, I don't feel like listening to the judiciary?
Now that's more problematic. Basically, as we've already mentioned, if you had, theoretically, allegedly, potentially, an attorney general who was, a fraud,
Hack.
yeah, all sorts of things, then they might very well to refuse to, institute a prosecution for criminal contempt. And I think but that's almost certainly what would happen if Judge Denise, Judge Boasberg, any of the other judges who are currently dealing with this matter do move towards criminal contempt. They would almost certainly have to go for a private prosecution. However, the executive has the pardon power.
Yeah.
And it is a plenary pardon power, Chris.
Yeah.
Which means that nobody can overrule it.
That's right. Yeah.
Under any circumstances. Which means that Donald Trump might very well then pardon anybody who finds himself confronted with criminal contempt.
There is a way around this, but unfortunately, it requires half of the House of Representatives and 2/3 of the House of the Senate.
Yeah.
In any normal situation in America, no president would allow his administration or her administration to get anywhere near this level of a danger with the judiciary.
Yeah.
And if they did, the Congress would have to basically make a choice. Either you're going to be loyal to the leader,
Yep.
and abrogate your power and say, listen, I am no longer going to be a representative of the House of Representatives, nor will I be a senator. I will be a pawn in the Trump game. Or you say, I don't want a president who can effectively, from the resolute desk, dictate law and dictate what the Constitution is and change it by a stroke of his pen. That's why you impeach people.
Yeah.
That's why you impeach. You can impeach the Attorney General. You can impeach the president. You can impeach people who work for the federal government.
That is the constitutional remedy for an executive that is acting against the law and against the Constitution.
Yeah, specifically for this.
And the last time someone did do something even vaguely approaching this, that's kind of what happened. That was Nixon. And Nixon didn't even have to get impeached.
He didn't even get impeached, no.
Because everyone knew, once the impeachment starts, he's going to get convicted because Republican senators went to meet him, led by Barry Goldwater, of all people, and said, yeah, we don't have the votes to stop you from getting convicted. You're going down, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's going to take the entire party down with him.
Exactly.
But now it's the reverse situation where the party is Trump.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. People are afraid to go against him. As Lisa Murkowski, senator from Alaska, just said, the fear is there.
There will be
retribution.
Retribution.
Exactly, repercussions. And and
it sounded like she was afraid for her life, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, no, I think the implication that she was reaching for was absolutely that she and others are afraid for their physical safety. So that's not great.
No.
But if you're looking for a nice little pick-me-up, something to make you feel that perhaps all is not lost yet, there is an interesting development regarding the due process cases, specifically an appeal that the Trump administration made against the most recent ruling by Judge Denise, who basically ordered the administration, you need to tell me every single day what is the status of Abrego Garcia, where is he? You need to tell me exactly what it is that you have been doing to get him back. You need to be telling me all the steps you're going to be taking to get him back and how those steps have been going. And again, the administration's response, aside from was to appeal to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. And this brings us to an interesting thing.
Okay.
This appeal was heard by en banc, and the decision very much went against the administration. The decision that was written by a judge by the last name of Wilkerson.
Okay.
He's a Reagan appointee, Chris.
Ah, Reagan appointee.
He is a very well-respected,
dangerous leftist there.
Very conservative, very, very deferential to executive power judge.
Okay.
So this is exactly the sort of person who, if there was even the barest way of being able to say that the administration has an arguable case, this is someone who would be very willing to give a sympathetic ear someone willing to take that argument on board and really give it a proper consideration. So, what was his ruling on this, you ask?
I didn't ask it, but by all means, please.
Well, fair enough. I'm gonna pretend that you asked because I'm gonna answer anyway,
right,
so
cool.
it doesn't matter. But yeah, so his ruling was basically on the lines of, this is the kind of argument that the administration is making that should strike fear into the hearts not just of judges, but of everyday Americans who are far from the courts. This is a claim that the government can take anybody, citizen or non-citizen, can exfiltrate them, render them to a third country, and then claim that nothing can be done about it.
Yeah.
This strikes at the heart of the constitutional freedoms on which the country is based. This is something that goes so thoroughly against the American idea as to raise the real possibility of a constitutional crisis. And this is something that we all need to wake up to. Basically, this is a call to arms. Now, because he is also someone who, it seems, just really, really, really doesn't want that to be the case, ends with what sounds of almost a heartfelt plea to the administration, saying, and I'm gonna paraphrase here because I don't have the quote directly in front of me. It is not yet vain to hope that our brethren in the executive will stand up for the value of due process, will stand up for the values that the American government is based on, that this is their opportunity to show that those values still have meaning before it's too late. And that last part is a direct quote. Before it's too late.
Yeah.
So I think what we're seeing here is that the constitutional crisis is actually upon us, and now I think the judiciary as a whole is coming to the realization that the Trump administration has no intention of being bound by the law.
Well, that's exactly what I mean. Before, but that's what I was saying was about the normalcy bias. Is that clearly everybody thought that nah, it can't go that far, and now it's like nope,
Right.
guys, this is it.
That.
It's red alert, and like if we don't win, if we can't fix this, this is it. Like pack it up and get out while you can.
Chris, Bill Kristol, famous conservative, neoconservative hawk, had a tweet recently saying, "Where do the abolish ICE people go to get their apology?" David Brooks, the centrist, the right-wing centrist, writing for the New York Times, famously pro George W. Bush, famously not very into this whole wokeness thing. Definitely someone who is on the right-hand side of the spectrum. Recently had a column saying we need constant civil insurrection here. We all need to man the barricades immediately, or we're going to lose the whole damn thing.
Yeah.
I
mean, I think the idea is finally getting around there. And just to wrap this up, as we're talking about this, as it might be too late, there was a story, I think, that came out yesterday or the day before about an actual American citizen, a person born in the United States, who was scooped up by ICE. And this is, again, in Florida, and there's some kind of random law in Florida.
Always Florida, isn't
it's
it,
always Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's some random law that was passed by the Republican-controlled Florida legislature for the past God knows how many years. And the short version is this person is an American citizen, but has effectively his name is Juan Carlos Lopez Gomez. And he was stopped in a traffic stop. The cops picked him up, and then they said, oh, well, he was detained because ICE wanted to keep him there. And they said, and his mother came to the court and said, here's his passport, here's his birth certificate.
Because he's a natural-born American.
He's a natural-born American. The judge, whose name is LaShawn Riggins from Leon County, said, this is a real birth certificate. I believe this person's an American citizen, but I cannot, because of Florida law, undo what's happening right now. Now, he was eventually released last night. That's Wednesday night, the 17th. But that's it. Like, it has now happened where an American citizen was detained by ICE. They have no reason to detain an American citizen.
They have no power.
They have no power to detain.
To my understanding, to detain an American citizen, certainly outside of any kind of law enforcement scenario. So, but that man could easily have been sent out of the country if this had happened before the Supreme Court ruling that you do need due process, that people have to have the right to be able to challenge their detention under habeas corpus. So, and then that man might now find himself in Seacot, in the torture concentration camp in El Salvador. And I think we all know that if that had happened, the government would be claiming, well, he was never a citizen, and also he was totally a terrorist.
And we can't get him back anyway.
And we can't get him back anyway.
So I guess he's just got to go.
Yep.
All right, we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back with the last two items.
All right. See you in a bit.
See ya. And we're back.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Our sponsor today, of course, is the Holy Roman Empire.
The Holy Roman Empire.
Gone, but not forgotten,
Gone,
Chris.
but not forgotten.
Yeah. Every time I look at a picture of a man with a Habsburg chin, just, I lay back and think about the empire.
Ich vergessen Sie.
Yeah.
So, we are aware that your time is precious, as is ours, so we'll try to not detain you for too much longer.
After all, who are we? Ice?
Who are we?
That's not funny. Oh, fuck.
So, last time we were talking about the Trump tariff war and the Trump trade war, and specifically at the end, we happened as we were starting the recording. We saw what was going on with the bond markets, and as a brief reminder, the bond markets are just how America earns basically debt.
Yeah.
So they go to people and they say, or countries, and say, give us some money. In 10 years, we'll give you some money back.
Yeah. We're going to borrow some money. We are offering these instruments, these bonds. You buy them, you get your money back after 10 years plus interest, and you know we're going to pay. We're America. We are the Lannisters of global finance, but not like without the sister banging.
And we always pay our debts.
Exactly. That's
and that's the whole point. We always pay our debts, and also the American cash, the dollar, reigns supreme as far as global currency is concerned.
It is the global reserve currency, Chris.
So there's a number of reasons why this is important. So after we finished the last pod, Trump had just announced that he was putting a pause on all of the tariffs and putting everybody down to 10%, with the exception of China, who he continues to raise their tariffs.
I think it's up to, 148% now?
It might be 148%.
Like which it might as well be, a cajillion at this point. Like, it's oh my God.
But from what I understand, basically Peter Navarro was kicked out of the room, and the Secretary of the Treasury ran in and said, you need to stop he had to convince him. Obviously, he didn't tell Trump to stop, because that would be,
right, you can't do that.
Sedition.
Right, exactly, absolutely.
You can't tell the leader that the leader is wrong. The leader's always right, but maybe basically what happened was the bond markets started to, the interest rate started to tank, because apparently Japan was selling off American debt at an enormous rate. Yeah. And that caused the interest rate to go higher. And what that means is that when America needs to refinance its debt, instead of thinking that they're going to be paying, 4% or 3%, now they were getting close to 4.5% or 5%, which means that they're going to need several $1 trillion more.
Well, that's the thing. I mean,
in 10 years' time.
It might sound like a small increase to you, going from like 4.5% to 5%, right? And you're thinking, well, that's just a 0.5% increase. Why would that be important? And that's because you got to think about it proportionally. Effectively, what that would mean is that for every $9 in interest that the government would have had to pay, now they got to pay 10. If you're going from 4.5% to 5%, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of a big jump, because that's like over a 10% increase in how much you got to be spending. So if instead of spending like $9 billion a year in interest payments, now you got to pay $10 billion a year. So there's an extra billion you got to come up with.
Extra billion that needs to come somewhere, come from somewhere, right?
And of course, U.S. government debt is, well, it's in the trillions.
And it's 120-something% more than the GDP of the country.
Exactly.
So which only works because America's currency is the international medium of trade.
Well, that's the thing. It's actually one of the reasons why our debt is so high. It's not just that having the U.S. Dollar as the international reserve currency allows the U.S. to borrow at very low interest rates, and therefore allows it to hold such a huge amount of debt while paying relatively little on the interest. It's that if the U.S. weren't borrowing so much money, the dollar couldn't be the reserve currency.
That's right.
Because one of the reasons people are willing to buy the dollar is that they want the ability to invest in the United States. They want the ability to hold their money in dollars. They want somewhere to hold those dollars that is safe, where they know they're going to get repaid, where they know they're going to get some reasonable rate of interest. And that is the 10-year Treasury bond. That is the purpose of it. That's what allows the U.S. to buy so much more than it sells to the rest of the world.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll keep an eye on it. And also the other part of this was that Trump had announced these these tariffs had been paused, and after he announced that the tariffs had been paused, the system. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, the market started to rebound. But I think it's very important to note that they haven't gone back to where they were because the tariffs are still there, and Trump is still trying to fight China on trade. And as we said last week, and a lot of people have said this week, China doesn't have the same political restrictions that Trump has, right?
Yeah.
So China doesn't have to worry about its people rising up against it because it's a totalitarian dictatorship where Trump, if he's already ticked off the rich people, which is why he's had to stop the plan. And as soon as it starts hitting normal, regular, everyday people, which it will when you need to buy a phone, which I believe phones and smartphones and computers might be getting an exemption.
He did say that smartphones will be getting an exemption. Interestingly enough, not the components with which to make smartphones, which means that if you were going to assemble smartphones in America, they would be hit with such a huge tax, whereas if you just import them directly from China, you don't get the tax. So you know, really helping out manufacturing in America, that one.
Yeah, I mean, again, this entire economic trade policy, the international trade policy, seems to be written in a fever dream of a failed freshman at some ridiculous little school.
It is very much a situation where people who have no idea how economics works are the ones in charge of our economic policies. So it's great. It's great. It's government by Dunning-Kruger.
It's government by Dunning-Kruger, which we are all currently maybe at the beginning of the dip. Who knows? Other news that's happened in the UK of import to a number of people as a ruling by the UK Supreme Court, which is a different kind of beast than the American Supreme Court.
Yep. For those of you following along at home, the U.S. Supreme Court can say that laws are unconstitutional, whereas in the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, Chris, is there a constitution here?
There's no constitution.
There is no constitution.
There's nothing written down.
Yep.
There's no entrenched acts. If a government decides tomorrow to get rid of the Human Rights Act, Labor could do it because they have a big enough majority, and then it's gone.
Well, that's the thing. That Parliament is sovereign. Parliament can pass any law that it wants to.
Yeah. And you can't do nothing about it.
But then you ask, well, what's the point of having courts? And of course, the point is, Parliament can pass any law that it wants. The question, though, is, what does the law mean?
Yeah.
Because you can't just sort of ask, well, okay, what did the parliamentarians who voted for the law say it meant? Because there's like hundreds of them. There's like 650 of them. And they're not all going to agree on what it is that they thought that the law meant.
And also, I mean, you're talking about there's different parties, and so who cares what? No offense, because as a person who works for one of the smaller parties in Parliament, in the SNP, even when we were the third largest party, our influence on the creation of legislation and what would become law was very small. It did happen at times, but it's not like they're coming knocking on our door every day. What do you think about this, guys? So it's up to the government, and it's up to the front bench, as in the 100 or so people that actually are the executive of the UK.
Well, except that it's not really up to them either, is the thing, because after all, the government could say that, oh no, this law meant all sorts of things. They could pass a law and then claim, oh no, it meant something completely different, and that's how you should interpret it.
Right.
And obviously that'd be crazy pants. You can't have that.
You can't let the executive interpret itself.
Exactly.
As we're seeing in America.
How do we know what it is that the law means? Well, that's literally what courts are for. So this word that's in this law, how do we understand it? That's what courts are for. Their job is to say, okay, what is the most reasonable understanding of what has actually been passed by Parliament? This is actually one of the most important things that I was taught in law school in this country when it came to public law, which is judicial interpretation starts with the idea that the law is the thing that is passed by Parliament, the words in the bill. That's what the law is. And what those words mean, that is for the court to determine. And it doesn't do it just on whatever it wants it to be. It does it on the basis of what's the most reasonable interpretation of these words. What is the obvious meaning of this? Because there's always the presumption that Parliament intends its acts to be understandable to the people.
Yeah.
And
so
this may seem odd. Why am I going into statutory interpretation?
Why are we talking about this?
Why are we talking? Well, why are we talking about this, Chris? What was this ruling about?
So, a group called Women for Scotland. Got to make sure I get that right.
Oh yeah.
Women for Scotland.
Or is it for Women Scotland?
For Women Scotland. One of the two. It's basically a Scottish-based women's group who basically did not like the concept of trans people coming into women's-only spaces, and so which started from like a small discussion group online, grew into a movement across the UK, and they petitioned the Supreme Court to define effectively the legal definition of a woman through the Equalities Act, 2010.
Right.
And this was a big case because in Scotland, the SNP government in Scotland had passed. I'm sorry, actually, let me put it properly. The Scottish Parliament and a majority of the Scottish Parliament, including the parties that are opposed to the SNP, had passed a law that effectively allowed people to self-identify, which was then blocked by the Westminster government,
right?
Which is a complicated situation, but I can go into it at a different time. And so there was a bunch of appeals on the definition of a woman in Scotland, and then that went to the UK Supreme Court, and the UK Supreme Court effectively said that that the plain reading of the definition of a woman in the Equalities Act was a biological woman.
Yeah.
A person who was born a woman.
Well, and that's the interesting thing about this. One of the big arguments inside of the debate over trans rights has been the idea that there is a difference between gender on the one hand and sex on the other.
Yeah.
That sex refers to sort of biology. It refers to chromosomes. It refers to lactation, ovulation, things of that nature. Whereas gender refers to people's self-conception. It refers to how people are treated in society. It refers to sort of the roles that we choose to play and that are forced on us regardless of our choosing. The social meaning of it is gender, whereas the sort of genetics and physical part of it, that's what sex is. And you're absolutely right that the case revolved around precisely what is meant by woman in the Equalities Act. Now, the ruling is interesting. It's being talked about a lot in the media. It's being hyped up, in particular, as a huge victory for sort of trans-exclusionary radical feminists. It's being talked about as a major blow for trans rights activists. I think the truth is not quite that severe. What the Supreme Court ruled was that the Equalities Act talks about sex as a protected characteristic. So you cannot discriminate against people on the basis of their sex.
Yeah.
The court has ruled that when they talk about protection on the basis of sex, they're talking about sex. They're talking about biology. They're talking about genetics. They're talking about the physical aspects there, and that it's not about gender. Now, that does not mean that trans people therefore have no protection under law. In fact, the Supreme Court is very, very clear that under the Equalities Act, sexual transition, trans identity is a protected characteristic against which you cannot discriminate directly or indirectly, absent some kind of very important, public-facing reason, basically. So those who are arguing that this means that trans people have no rights under the law, they would be incorrect about that. That is not what the Supreme Court has said.
Yeah.
And so you would think then that the results of this would be relatively limited, but it seems that actually that's not quite the case. There are some very difficult and tricky aspects about this ruling in terms of how it's going to apply going forward.
Yeah, we're looking at, like, because we're not going to get into the discussion of what is a woman and, various trans and all that, because we're not trans and we're not women. So obviously that's well outside of our wheelhouse. But there are questions about how this applies, because if you can't discriminate against a person because they're trans,
right?
But then a trans person, well, in this case a trans woman, can't go into a women's changing facility or a women's toilet in the shops. But there you have this, you have a barrier there. Like, what do you do?
Right.
There.
And
if you're the trans person, what do you do?
Yeah.
And then there's the other issues is that, okay, so a woman walks into a changing room, let's say, and the woman doesn't fit the ideological, not ideological, but she doesn't maybe
Yeah,
not
the,
look
the idealized
the
version of
idealized
femininity.
version, and like so how do you how do you if you're a lady,
Yeah.
because a lot of the arguments from the people who were born women's side
Mm-hmm.
is that this is about protection. This is about also maintaining safe spaces and free spaces for women that were,
Right.
denied to them, for most of human civilization.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
A
know,
very fair point. And of course, also, there are women who have been honestly traumatized by the men in their lives.
yeah,
And who are looking for spaces that do not involve men.
yeah.
And having met some straight men in my time, not all of us are on the level.
Not always
Yeah.
awesome. Not always
Some
awesome.
of us are Donald Trump, it turns out. So yeah.
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 Okay.
So
Well, that's
yeah.
fair, but that also creates another little sticking point as well,
Mm.
because this anti-trans movement is a huge part of the right-wing, far-right political talking points.
But that's the thing. This really is something that seems to have been colonized by the far right, and that's not entirely surprising. They have a history of colonizing everything they can, such as Star Wars.
Well,
When the new Star Wars movies came out, all of a sudden the right wing got very big into you can't have a black Star Trooper.
can't have a black stormtrooper.
That's impossible.
He was great, by the way. Finn was great.
Oh yeah. 100%. One of the best parts of the movie.
but-
John Boyega, what up?
But I've been thinking about it like this,
Mhm.
and basically, when I think about the right wing, almost all that they do is try to isolate the other, and
Yep.
then bring some of the people that they used to castigate into the fold.
Mhm.
So in America, for example, it used to be, and still is in some ways, black people,
Mhm.
the Irish,
Huh.
the Italians,
Yep.
Jewish people.
Oh yeah.
They were all part of the other. And
Mhm.
and then obviously as you left kind of the 1900s, then you started the Irish, the Italians, the Jewish people started being merged into it's okay to be them, it's okay to be you.
Well, that's the thing. There's a very famous and very good book by Noel Ignatieff called "How the Irish Became White," that sort of
Yeah.
talks precisely about that process of incorporation of some ethnic minorities into whiteness, precisely to maintain that boundary against black people.
Yeah. And then Channel 4 had another thing which kind of got me thinking about this, and they were
Mhm.
basically they were talking about the kind of the struggles of the LGBT community, and then maybe the struggles between the trans community and the rest of the LGBT community.
Mm-hmm.
And so they said basically in 2015 in America, when gay marriage was legalized or
Mhm.
permitted, then that basically normalized homosexuality in America, where
Yeah.
30 years earlier they'd be saying that being gay was a preference and a choice.
Oh, yeah,
and you
and-
just choose not to be gay.
And if you're gay, then you are a threat to children, and you cannot be trusted. You cannot be allowed to teach
Yeah.
in schools,
Or
or
adopt
to,
kids.
or be in the same changing room as others.
Yeah.
And so, which you might be thinking to yourself sounds a little bit like some of the arguments being made in this debate.
Yeah, I mean, it is wild that some of these kind of talking points have come back, because I was saying earlier to Patrick that
Yeah.
in the 90s I remember people saying you are not born gay, you choose to be gay.
Oh yeah, you heard that a
Um,
lot.
And so, but going back to what I was saying is that once gay marriage was legalized more or less in America,
Mm-hmm.
that was another group that was kind of scooped into being quote unquote normal.
Yeah.
So now who do you go after if you're the right wing? And they almost immediately turn their eyes to trans people.
Yep. And it's worth mentioning that I suspect that the right wing, those in the right wing who are attempting to use this issue for their own purposes, they're not going to stop with trans people.
No,
the,
no.
The whole idea is you get the trans people to be unpersons, and then you can start getting other people to be unpersons
Go
because,
back up the hill.
well, exactly right. And if you're in the LGB community and you think you sort of separate yourself off of trans people and they can be outlaws and you'll be fine, I'd suggest possibly not, because I kind of suspect that the right wing has every intention of moving on to you next before going on for Jews, black people, and literally everybody else that the right wing has already gone after.
I'm thinking about that Supreme Court case in the States. What was it last year? Oh, it was the one that got rid of of Roe v. Wade.
Oh yes.
And effectively, the argument from the right wing part of the court was that if it's not a law, it's not protected. Just like
Yeah.
gay marriage wasn't protected. Just like
Yep.
love
interracial.
versus Virginia.
Yeah, Loving v. Virginia.
Loving v. Virginia.
That,
That wasn't protected. So, and they had just a list of things they were going to go after, and you could see that they were like, none of this stuff is protected. So, if somebody can figure out the right argument, you could effectively criminalize interracial marriage.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The Supreme Court has basically given us the pathway towards doing that, which amazing.
So yeah, and I'm almost. It's probably better that this issue happened here in the UK, because at least you have a chance to maybe have a cogent argument about it, because I think that, there's a lot more going on to this than, a binary choice between being a man. Not even a choice, but binary, like, concepts of man and women or male and female, given that we're all conceived as women.
Well, that's true. And it is one of the fun things that in the United States there was an attempt to pass a law that said
was an executive order.
Oh, it's executive order.
Trump signed an executive order that said, you are to be referred to as the gender you were at conception.
Yeah, which is women.
Women.
We are all, and everyone starts with 2 X
men
chromosomes.
are the aberration.
Yeah.
we're
I mean, for a bunch of mutants, most of us are okay. I think we're doing all right.
Some of us are.
Some of us are okay.
But and there's also this kind of final point. Maybe not the final point, but there's another point here, and that no one's ever talking about trans men either. I happen to know a trans man, and you wouldn't be able to tell that he used to be a she.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure he's got a partner with a lady, and so, like, I find it very interesting that we've only ever focused on just the female side of this. Because in theory, let's say we take this to its full extent here. If a trans woman can't walk into a ladies only space,
right, but is forced instead to use a men's only space,
but they got to flip it around.
Yeah.
So a trans man, where do they go?
Right.
But I don't know if this ruling had anything to do with them, or if anybody cares.
Oh no. Like that is a clear implication of the ruling, that if you are a trans man, then in terms of your protections under the Equalities Act, your protections exist for your trans identity, absolutely. Yeah. But also as a man, you are protected as a man under the Equalities Act. So if we're talking about single-sex spaces without reference to gender or identity or anything like that, and if there's only a men's changing area and a women's changing area, then if we're going to be enforcing things on that basis, it would mean that trans men would be forced to go into the women's changing area. And I'm not certain that that's exactly what Joanna Kathleen Rowling was going for with her support of this particular case.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of kind of giant open questions here.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the judge ruled that this isn't a victory for anybody, but you wouldn't be able to tell from the headlines today across the UK. This is definitely a victory for the right wing, and a victory for those women who felt concerned and unsafe in spaces that they thought were theirs. And there's no easy answer here, but I do feel that that a lot more work needs to be done, because trans people are real.
Yep.
It's not just some thought or even a belief.
It's not a hypothetical scenario. It's, tens of thousands of literal human beings.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be a human being, then you're going to be a human being, and you can't just sort of cease existing because someone is uncomfortable with the fact that you exist.
Yeah.
That's not how justice works.
But it is an incredibly complicated situation, which requires, calm heads, which I don't know if we're going to get right now at this time in human history.
Yeah. There is one last thing I would like to sort of bring up, if I may.
Go ahead.
Very, very quickly.
I'll allow it.
Oh, thank you. The head of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission. I'm trying to find her name real quick, and unfortunately, because I'm very bad at the internet, you wouldn't know it, but I'm very bad at the internet. I cannot find it right here. No, I found it. Baroness Faulkner. So Baroness Faulkner, who is the head of the commission, was asked on a radio interview about what this would mean for the NHS. The NHS.
Let's just a little bit of background there.
Go
there
ahead.
was basically there was an issue with the NHS where a pair of nurses had an issue with a trans person changing in their changing space, which is also tied into a lot of this. So it's a big deal because the NHS is, I think, the biggest employer in England, if not the UK.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it would pretty much have to be if it's the biggest employer in England. Yeah.
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. But so. So given the scenario, right, the NHS has had policies on how to deal with these issues. These policies have been in place for quite some time. And obviously, those policies that existed are not based on the Supreme Court's ruling.
Right.
So it raises real questions about how things progress from there.
Yeah.
Baroness Faulkner was asked about this, and her response was basically to say the NHS immediately needs to change all of its policies to follow the ruling on the Equalities Act, which I'm not certain that that's how that works, but, whatever. But also, when she was asked specifically, okay, so if we're going to have single-sex spaces for, like, bathrooms and whatnot, what are trans people supposed to do exactly? If you're a trans man, are you supposed to go to the women's room? If you're a trans woman, are you supposed to go to the men's room? Is this safe for everybody? And you would think that the head of the Equality Commission, right, would be concerned with exactly this issue and would want to say something useful that adds to the debate. And instead her response was that they should use their influence to advocate for a third space for sort of like, I guess, trans bathrooms, which it strikes me as odd because if trans people don't already have those third spaces, right, then there's nowhere for them to go to be safe. And then how do you participate in public life if you can't pee?
Well, that's again, it's like I said, there are a lot of open questions here. So that's why I think, despite people claiming that it's a victory, I think that the Supreme Court basically saying it's not a victory is right, because effectively they've just opened up a massive can of worms and just tossed it back into society and said deal with it.
I mean, ultimately that is the court's job. Their job isn't to say here's what the law should be. Their job is to say here's what the law is. And the thing is, in this country at least, Parliament is always able to pass a new law. If there are problems with the current setup, there are ways to fix that. So I will agree with Baroness Faulkner in one way. It is incumbent on all of us, I think, to advocate for a just solution to this issue.
Yeah.
That said, I think she could probably do a bit better job than just saying, if you got to pee, you should advocate for them to build you
hold it until you get your own space.
Yeah, exactly. Just wait a few months while they build a new washroom.
While they agree to your demands.
Yeah, exactly. So it's gonna go great.
Yeah. So
who needs kidneys?
Who needs kidneys?
Yeah.
So well, that was a very complicated but interesting little dive into the trans debate.
Yeah. And I think that we've done ourselves a bit of pride here by a reasonable, respectful, and above all, 100% earned viewpoint that we have on the issue.
I was wondering where you were going with that. How it was going to end? Yeah, no.
No. I stuck the landing.
You stuck the landing. So I mean, so I think we'll cut it there.
I think that's reasonable
for this episode of Doctors Not Doctors.
Yeah.
So as always, I'm Dr. Silverstein.
I'm Dr. Armshaw.
And we are doctors,
not doctors.
Good night.